the 5th of January, 2016, George Street, Sydney. The Dick Smith Electronics gift cards stop working. $2.5 million of customer prepayments. Worthless overnight. Epilepsy Action, the charity for Australians with seizures, loses $200,000 in raffle prizes. Shop floor staff are abused at counters across the country. 24 hours earlier, Dick Smith Holdings went into administration. The greatest private equity heist of all time, according to Forager analyst Matt Ryan. Anchorage Capital put in $10 million in 2012. It came out with $500 million in 2014. 3,300 employees gone. Phil Cave, Bill Wavish, Nick Aboud. The brand sold to Kogan for $2.6 million in IP only. The founder, Australian of the Year, the man who started with $610 in a Neutral Bay car park in 1968, called it utter greed. Chapter 1. The Larrikin, the 18th of March, 1944. Roseville, Sydney. The Pacific War is at its height. Richard Harold Smith is born, a boy who will be diagnosed dyslexic before the word is commonly used, who will struggle so badly with speech that he calls himself Dick Miff. 60 years later, the call sign of his helicopter is still MIF. The hardship trigger arrives at age 17. His father, a salesman at the Angus and Robertson bookstore, starts a small business. It fails. The family financial collapse defines the boy's economic identity. He learns that brands are mortal. The deeper family hook lives across the road. Harold Casno, born Wellington, 1878. By the 1940s, he is Australia's foremost pictorialist photographer, the man whose 1937 portrait, Spirit of Endurance, would become the most reproduced image in Australian art history. He is also young Dick's maternal grandfather. The boy crosses the street to watch his grandfather work in the dark room. Casnio teaches him how to coax clouds from blank paper, Dick's own phrase, recorded in the Australian Geographic feature of January 2026. A Saturday morning in 1968. 24-year-old Dick Smith pulls a folding table out of the back of a Holden ute, sets it up in a paid car park in Neutral Bay, $15 a week rent. He lays out 6 car radios he bought wholesale that week. He has $610 in startup capital, a fiancée named Pip who keeps the books, and a sign that reads Dick Smith Car Radios. The first proper shopfront opens at Atchison Street, St Leonard's, the surplus trading street where ex-military radio gear had been changing hands since 1946. Then Carlotta Street, Artarmon. Then the breakthrough flagship at Gore Hill on the Pacific Highway. Within a decade, the car park stall has become Australia's largest specialist electronics retailer. The Citizens Band Radio Boom drives annual sales to $17 million by 1978. He marries Pip in March 1969. He becomes the first person to circumnavigate the world solo in a helicopter in 1983. Australian of the Year, 1986. Companion of the Order of Australia, 2015. A national figure who never lost the larrikin spelling of his own surname. If you watched our Adelaide Steamship episode, you know the corporate Raider playbook. John Spolvin's $1.35 billion collapse in 1991. Here's the connection you don't know. Adelaide Steamship, at its peak, owned both AWA, the company whose radio valves Dick Smith was selling, and Woolworths, the company that would one day hand Dick Smith Electronics to the next generation of corporate raiders. Chapter 2. The World War II Ecosystem. 1942. Ashfield, Sydney. Amalgamated Wireless AWA opens a new 65,000 square foot valve plant. The plant produces magnetrons, klystrons and TR switches for the Royal Australian Navy. A separate AWA factory is devoted entirely to aircraft instruments, compasses, Sperry gyro horizons, directional gyros, altimeters, for the Royal Australian Air Force. The flagship product is the AWA-3B wireless set, a compact battlefield radio carried by the Australian Army through New Guinea and used by the Coast Watchers, the network of Australian volunteers who reported Japanese ship movements from Solomon Islands jungles. The radios these men whispered into were assembled at Ashfield. The radios that warned the Pacific Fleet of Japanese carrier deployments were made by Australian women on a Sydney production line. The women on that production line were photographed. Max Dupin, Australia's most famous modernist photographer, the man who took the iconic 1937 Sunbaker, was born in Ashfield in 1911, the same suburb whose factory he would later document. The State Library of New South Wales holds 12 of his negatives. File 434 ON 559. Workers at AWA Factory, Ashfield, circa 1940s. 5 by 7 inch black and white. While Dupin himself served as a camouflage officer with the Royal Australian Air Force from 1942, his first wife, Olive Cotton, ran his Castlereagh Street studio and was separately commissioned by AWA to produce wartime photographs, 2 of Australia's greatest 20th century photographers documenting one Sydney electronics manufacturer. The Art Deco York Street headquarters, completed in 1939, becomes the corporate brain of Australian electronics. Its white radio tower, the AWA Tower, is Sydney's tallest building until 1958. The skyline of mid-century Sydney is anchored by the company that made the radios that fought the war. The factory that made the radios that ran the Coast Watchers was the same factory whose surplus valves a 24-year-old named Dick Smith would sell out of a Neutral Bay car park in 1968. 26 years between the war that built the electronics industry and the founder who built the retail brand. The Royal Australian Army, Navy and Air Force disposed of vast quantities of World War II electronic equipment between 1945 and 1955. The Concord Council tip in Sydney's inner west becomes the primary dumping ground. Hobbyists scavenge valves, transformers, capacitors and chassis for amateur radio projects. A boy named Gary Johnston scavenged discarded parts from AWA and Philips at the Concord tip through the 1950s and 1960s. He built amplifiers from war salvage. The first transistors he ever held were stamped in Sydney for the Pacific Theatre. By 1975, he had joined Dick Smith Electronics as NSW Sales and Marketing Manager. He worked alongside Dick Smith himself for 7 years. When Dick sold the company to Woolworths in 1980, he did something quiet on his last day. He left an advertisement on Gary's desk. The ad was for a small CBD component shop called John Carr & Cohen, a 2-page brochure and a handwritten note from Dick. Gary bought the shop a week later and renamed it J-Car Electronics. The J is his own initial. The Car is from John Carr. If you've seen our J-Car episode, you know what happened next. J-Car is still trading in 2026. Approximately 146 stores. Roughly $500 million in revenue. Every Dick Smith store in Australia is a memory. Chapter 3. The Woolworths Years, 1980. 20 stores, approximately $17 million in annual revenue. Dick Smith and Pip have built the largest specialist electronics retailer in Australia from a Neutral Bay car park in 12 years. Dick is 36 years old. He is tired. He wants out. Woolworths Limited approaches. The supermarket giant wants the consumer electronics category. Dick negotiates. The deal closes. Woolworths buys 60% of Dick Smith Electronics in 1980. Then the remaining 40% in 1982. Total transfer value, approximately $25 million. Dick retains no shares and no operational role after 1982. His name and his face stay on the brand. His equity is gone. He uses the proceeds to fund his next chapter. 1986. He founds Australian Geographic, still publishing in 2026. The January 2026 issue ran the feature. Dick Smith, Life of a Larrikin, 1999. He launches Dick Smith Foods, 2021. His memoir, My Adventurous Life. The post-DSE Dick Smith is a national institution by the time the brand built in his name reaches its peak. The Woolworths years build the empire that will be stripped. The powerhouse superstores launched 1996, first at Bankstown, large format stores featuring kitchen appliances alongside electronics. By 2010, the chain operates approximately 325 stores across Australia and New Zealand. Annual revenue exceeds $1.5 billion. Australia's #1 specialist consumer electronics chain. The 1980 System 80 home computer, the TRS-80 clone manufactured in Hong Kong and Korea, sells approximately 13,000 units at $999 each. Dick Smith later said the System 80 made a fortune. The follow-up Super 80 Zeti-based kit computer launches 1981 in partnership with Electronics Australia. The cultural anchor is the Funway into Electronics Kit Series, Volume 1, 1979, ISBN 095-9508007. Written by Dick Smith himself. Edited by Sam Voron and Ross Tester. The iconic orange and blue and black tricolour cover, integrated into secondary school curricula across the country. The generational soldering text. Every Australian male teenager who grew up between 1975 and 2000 had a Funway under his bed and a Dick Smith catalogue under his pillow. The brand was childhood. The 31st of January, 2012. Woolworths CEO Grant O'Brien announces a strategic review. A $420 million restructuring provision is booked against the Dick Smith division. O'Brien's verbatim statement to investors, Dick Smith is non-core in the size and context of the broader Woolworths retail platform. Last reported annual sales, $1.5 billion. 32 years after the original acquisition, Woolworths is exiting the brand it built. If you've watched our Holden film, you already know what corporate parents do to Australian icons. General Motors divested Holden Manufacturing in 2017. Woolworths divested Dick Smith Electronics in 2012. Different decade. Same play guidebook. The corporate parent walks away. The brand survives just long enough to be killed by someone else. Chapter 4. The Buyer. The 26th of November, 2012. Sydney. Woolworths announces the sale of Dick Smith Electronics to Anchorage Capital Partners. The press release lists a headline price of $20 million cash up front. The deferred consideration brings the total reported price to approximately $94 million paid in July 2013 and an ultimate total of approximately $115 million. Woolworths retains a small upside provision on a future sale. Anchorage acquires 100% of Dick Smith Electronics. Approximately 325 stores. Approximately 4,500 staff across Australia and New Zealand. The transaction is celebrated in the trade press as a fair value distressed divestment. The first named villain steps forward. Philip Phil Cave AM, founder and executive chair of Anchorage Capital Partners, co-founded Anchorage in 2007. Former executive director of Macquarie Bank, the man who recruited Bill Moss in 1984. 40 years of turnarounds. Sunbeam. Victor. Golden Circle, bought in 2007, flipped to Heinz in 6 months. Burger King New Zealand, a philanthropist, a member of the Order of Australia. The kind of corporate name that opens every boardroom door in Sydney. Cave's signing quote on the Dick Smith acquisition. Verbatim, Anchorage is impressed with the underlying quality of the business and sees Dick Smith as an ideal fit for our investment mandate. The second named villain is already on the board. Bill Wavish, former Woolworths Finance Director and Supermarkets Director, the man who oversaw the Dan Murphy's acquisition. Helped form BWS. Former Executive Chairman of Myer under TPG Private Equity. The textbook PE buys retailer floats at precedent of the previous decade. Joined the Dick Smith board in November 2012 as an effective hands-on operator. The architect of the supplier credit and rebate strategy that will define the company's earnings. Retired in May 2015, 8 months before the collapse. The third figure works behind the scenes. Alan Moss, former CEO of Macquarie Bank, the man who built the Millionaire's Factory. Anchorage's investment committee advisor, Macquarie Capital becomes Anchorage's broker and financial advisor. Cave came from Macquarie. Moss came from Macquarie. Macquarie Capital wrote the IPO prospectus. Macquarie Bank later received the December 2015 payment that breached the NAB facility. Read this. Anchorage forms a new shell company called Dick Smith Sub Holdings. Its issued capital approximately $10 million. The acquired Dick Smith business already holds $12.6 million in cash on its own balance sheet. Anchorage has yet to spend a single dollar of its own money on the deferred consideration. The company will pay for itself. Chapter 5. The Strip. December 2012. Anchorage takes the keys. The 4-step heist begins. Step 1. Write down the assets to near zero on acquisition. $58 million of inventory, written down. $55 million of plant and equipment, written down. $8 million of onerous lease provisions taken. Total asset markdowns on day 1, $121 million. The shelves are full. The books say the shelves are empty. Step 2. Sell the marked down stock at full retail margins without restocking. Anchorage sells the existing inventory at the price Dick Smith customers expected to pay. The cost of goods sold reflects the near zero acquisition write-down. The shelves run thinner. New shoppers find empty pegs. Approximately $140 million of operating cash flow is generated in 12 months. Step 3. Use the company's own cash to pay Woolworths the deferred consideration. The $117 million that emerges from the strip funds the July 2013 instalment, Anchorage's net cash investment on the acquisition. Approximately $0. Step 4. Inflate the forecast earnings for the IPO. The P&E write-down cuts annual depreciation by approximately $15 million. The onerous lease provisions cut another $10 million from operating cost. Forager analyst Matt Ryan's verbatim verdict, October 2015. You can fairly easily turn a $7 million profit in 2013 into a $40 million forecast profit in 2014. How to buy a business for $115 million using only $10 million of your own money. Get the seller to defer the payment. Write down the assets. Sell the marked down stock. Use the cash you generate to pay the seller. The seller is Woolworths. The cash is the company's own. The new shareholders at IPO will foot the bill to repurchase the stock you stripped. Read that again. Bill Wavish's parallel innovation runs alongside the strip. The O&A rebates, opportunity and assistance rebates, are supplier credits booked on purchase rather than sale. The supplier gives Dick Smith a credit for placing a large order. The credit hits the profit and loss as immediate earnings. Store managers are rewarded for ordering inventory that generates the rebate, regardless of whether customers want the product. On the shop floor through 2013, the strip is visible. The shelves in the suburban stores run thinner. The Dick Smith staff member of the 1980s, the trained hobbyist who could explain a transistor, is replaced by a casual on a 4-hour shift. Wavish under cross-examination under oath, age 72, describes the mechanism himself. Instead of needing to go to banks for these facilities, you go to the suppliers. I have a nice big Christmas order and I want a nice credit for this. The phrase is verbatim. The architect is unembarrassed. By the end of 2013, Dick Smith Electronics looks on paper like a healthy, growing retailer with forecast profit of $40 million. The income statement is engineered. The balance sheet is engineered. The earnings multiple, suggested by Macquarie Capital, prices the company at $520 million. Anchorage is ready to float. Chapter 6. The Float. The 4th of December 2013, noon Sydney time. Dick Smith Holdings lists on the Australian Securities Exchange under the ticker code DSH. IPO price $2.20 per share. Market capitalisation $520 million. Funds raised $344.5 million. Shares issued 156.6 million. The underwriters are Macquarie Capital, Anchorage's broker and advisor, and Goldman Sachs. Anchorage cuts its stake from 98% to 20% on listing day, then sells progressively through 2014. The 16th of September 2014. Anchorage fully exits, selling its remaining 47.3 million shares for approximately $105 million. Total Anchorage exit value across the IPO and post-IPO sell-down, approximately $450 to $500 million. The IPO is heavily marketed to retail investors. Macquarie Capital and Goldman Sachs run roadshows in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth through November 2013. Mum and Dad Australians who bought Dick Smith car radios in 1968 line up for an allocation in the brand they remember from childhood. The prospectus projects a $40 million profit for FY 2014, the engineered figure from Anchorage's write-down mechanics. The retail allocation is heavily oversubscribed. The shares close on listing day at $2.20, flat. They trade through 2014 above the IPO price. By December 2015, they are below $1. By January 2016, $0. Anchorage put in approximately $10 million of its own money in November 2012. It came out with approximately $500 million by September 2014. Multiple, approximately 50 times the capital invested in 22 months. The shareholders who bought the IPO at $2.20 would, within 26 months, hold shares worth $0. 3,300 employees would lose their jobs. $2.5 million of customer gift cards would be rendered worthless. The greatest private equity heist of all time. Read that again. The third named villain is the public face of the float, Nick Aboud. Approximately 19 years at Myer. Rose to National Director of Store Operations, then Executive General Manager Operations. Saw himself as heir apparent to the top job. Passed over, quit Myer, joined Anchorage in 2012 as inaugural Managing Director and CEO of Dick Smith. Compensation package 2014, $2.6 million, falling to $1.4 million in 2015. Plus a $6 million cash payment at listing, per the IPO prospectus. His shareholding, never reduced, would be worth approximately $5.4 million at the trading halt in January 2016, down 84% from the IPO price. The verbatim hubris quote that defines his tenure. Aboud told the trade press that Dick Smith Electronics would be bigger than JB Hi-Fi, bigger than the Australian-born competitor that had eaten Dick Smith's market share for 15 years. Aboud's IPO listing day statement, verbatim. Today is a major step in the evolution of our company. We have been greatly encouraged by the institutional and retail shareholder response. The institutional and retail shareholder response. The next 26 months would teach those shareholders what they had bought. Chapter 7. The Bond Heist. The 3rd of October 2013. Westfield Bondi Junction, Sydney. 2 months before the IPO, Nick Aboud launches Move, his Apple Store-style Fashtronics concept. The fashion duo Romance was born, designs the phone accessories range. The head of Move is Michael Dykes. Aboud, at the launch, verbatim, "This is the launch of something first in the world where we're bringing fashion and technology together. We call it Fashtronics, and we want to bring that to the world." The Move stores roll out: Bondi Junction, Macquarie, Burwood, Melbourne CBD, High Point, Indoor Upali, Garden City, Brisbane, Sydney Airport. 10 locations. The Bondi Junction prototype is the showroom, the perfume-scented fitting room where customers try phone cases against their outfit. Mirrored walls, backlit display tables, Apple Store aesthetic with designer perfumery overlay. $50 phone covers from Romance was born. $200 designer headphones. Meanwhile, the warehouses fill with rebate-driven inventory. Store managers order goods because supplier rebates count as immediate earnings, not because customers want them. The Wavish O&A mechanism. The inventory on the Dick Smith books rebuilds from a post-strip low of $36 million back to $254 million by the end of 2014. Then climbs higher through 2015, past $300 million. The new public shareholders are paying for Anchorage's stripped inventory. The same shelves marked down to near zero in December 2012 are being restocked by retail buyers in 2014. The Forager report would later quote one observer, "The new shareholders foot the bill to repurchase the stock you stripped." If you've watched our international A. Cooko film, you'll remember Michael May, Mercedes-trained MD, arrived at Iveco February 2020. Closed the Dandenong factory June 2022. Promoted to Turin 2024. Nick Aboud's story is the parallel. He didn't close a factory built by his ancestors. He ran a 1968 startup founded by an Australian of the Year as a Bondi Junction perfume boutique. Same corporate manager pattern. Both empty by the end. The early warning signs are visible by mid-2014. Same-store sales decline despite revenue growth. A textbook tell of rebate-driven volume masking soft consumer demand. Joe Aston, in the Australian Financial Review Rear Window column, starts questioning the rebate accounting in print. The trade press notices Move stores are quiet on weekday afternoons. Institutional analysts begin modelling the inventory build against same-store sales, and the numbers do not reconcile. Forager Funds analyst Matt Ryan begins his forensic analysis through 2014 and into 2015. He sees what the prospectus did not disclose. He sees what every reader of the published balance sheet could have seen. He begins drafting the report that will name the heist. The structural headwinds make the timing brutal. Apple opened its first Australian store on George Street, Sydney in 2008. The smartphone displaces the standalone camera, the GPS unit, the MP3 player and the calculator. Half of the DSE catalogue gone in 5 years. Jebby Hi-Fi and Harvey Norman take the discretionary electronics share. Kogan and eBay take the value share online. Chapter 8. The 29th of October 2015. Forager Funds publishers. Dick Smith is the greatest private equity heist of all time on its Bristlemouth blog. Analyst, Matt Ryan. The Forager report is forensic. Every Anchorage stripping mechanic, the write-downs, the cash extraction, the deferred consideration trick, is laid out in chapter and verse. The investor community reads it within hours. The buy-side institutions reread the prospectus. The Dick Smith share price slides from above $2 through the autumn. By late November, the price is below $1.20. Short sellers move in. The institutional sell-down accelerates. The 30th of November, 2015. Dick Smith Holdings issues a profit downgrade. A $60 million inventory write-down is announced. The board admits the company has overstocked on rebate-driven inventory. The press release attempts the usual phrases: challenging trading conditions, promotional discounting, extraordinary item. The market does not believe them. The share price drops to 90 cents within 48 hours. By mid-December, the shares trade well below the dollar mark. The collapse is now being engineered in the background by the company's own CFO. The 16th of November, 2015. HSBC, the London-headquartered bank, lifts the Dick Smith overdraft from $60 million to $80 million. CFO Michael Potts misrepresents the purpose of the increase to HSBC as booking day stock funding. Justice Michael Ball of the New South Wales Supreme Court would later find this misleading and deceptive conduct. December 2015. Dick Smith Holdings draws the HSBC overdraft to pay approximately $9.96 million owing on credit facilities. A further $1.195 million is paid to Macquarie Bank, Anchorage's old broker, the same Macquarie that took Dick Smith to IPO. This breaches the NAB syndicated facility terms. The breach cannot be cured. McGrath Nicol would later determine Dick Smith Holdings was insolvent on at least the 23rd of December, 2015, 2 days before Christmas. December 2015. Christmas. The company is insolvent. The directors know it. Then comes the offer that will become the emotional centre of this entire story. Dick Smith launches a 10% gift card bonus. Spend $100 on a gift card. Receive $110 in store credit. Use it on Boxing Day or later in January. Thousands of Australians buy gift cards as Christmas presents. The cards become birthday cards, thank you cards, raffle prizes, employee bonuses. Parents buy them for teenagers. Grandparents buy them for grandchildren. The cards become a national stocking stuffer. They represent prepaid revenue Dick Smith has already received and spent. They are an interest-free loan from customers to a company that the board already knows is insolvent. The Sydney charity Epilepsy Action buys $200,000 worth of Dick Smith gift cards. The charity intends to use the cards as raffle prizes through 2016, a fundraising program that supports research and patient services for Australians living with seizures. Chapter 9. The Collapse. The 4th of January, 2016. Morning Sydney time. The first business day of the new year. Dick Smith Holdings places itself into voluntary administration. Trading on the ASX is halted at 9:30 a.m. McGrath Nicol is appointed administrator, lead partner, Joseph Hayes. Ferrier Hodgson is appointed receiver by the syndicated lenders NAB and HSB, lead partner James Stewart. The banks claim approximately $124.89 million owing. Total creditor shortfall is later assessed in excess of $260 million. Chairman Rob Murray, verbatim, on the morning of administration. It is with considerable regret that the board has placed the company into voluntary administration. Sales and cash generation were below management expectations. Joseph Hayes of McGrath. Nicol, verbatim. An unfortunate end for one of Australia's iconic retailers, all the more significant given its speed and scale. The 5th of January 2016, 24 hours after administration. The receivers announced that approximately $2.5 million in customer gift cards will not be honoured. Customers learn via email and store visits that their Christmas prepayments are worthless. Shop floor staff, facing their own redundancies within weeks, are abused by customers across stores in every state. Then comes the named victim. Epilepsy Action, the charity for Australians with seizures, is reported by the Australian Financial Review via the Big Smoke on the 9th of January 2016. Verbatim. Epilepsy Action was ripped off to the tune of $200,000. The raffle program that was to fund Australians with epilepsy collapses. The gift cards in the safe at the charity's Sydney office are pieces of plastic. The Bondi Junction Move store on the 5th of January 2016. Perfume, fitting room still operational. Mirrored walls still polished. Romance was born. Phone cases still on the display tables. The 22nd of January 2016. The 27 David Jones Electronics, powered by Dick Smith. Concession stores close. 181 staff redundant in a single morning. The 25th of February 2016. The all stores closure. Approximately 363 remaining stores close. Approximately 2,460 Australian employees lose their jobs that day, plus 430 New Zealand employees, plus the 181 from David Jones. Total, approximately 3,300 workers. The 15th of March and 1st of April, 2016. Kogan.com buys the online business and intellectual property for 2.6 million Australian dollars, the Dick Smith brand name, the DSE private label brand names, and the database of 1.5 million email subscribers. No stores, no stock, no employees transfer. Early May 2016, the last stores trade, the 25th of July 2016, liquidation. Dick Smith himself, verbatim, reading the news in January 2016. I'm angry that these greedy bankers have destroyed a business that could have kept going for a long time. This is a completely unnecessary collapse that has been driven by greed. Anchorage Capital's conduct, in Dick Smith's words, utter greed and seemingly unethical. Chapter 10. The Courtroom. The 11th of June 2021. Sydney Supreme Court. Justice Michael Ball delivers judgment in DSHE Holdings versus Abood No. 3 and NAB versus Abood No. 4. 21 NSRSC 673. The receiver-led company case and the bank-led bank case are tried together. CFO Michael Potts is ordered to pay NAB exactly $43,041,295.97 plus interest for misleading and deceptive conduct in deliberately withholding inventory information from HSBC when securing the syndicated facility increase in November 2015. Justice Ball, verbatim, "It is one thing for a lender to agree to an extension of a loan already made. It is quite another for it to agree to lend additional money. On some measures, the principal plus interest later swells to $57.278 million, per the High Court's Special Leave Summary of 2023. The judgment against Potts personally is among the largest in Australian corporate law history. At first instance, Nick Abood wins the bank case. The claims against him are dismissed. He is awarded approximately $1 million in costs. Then comes the Court of Appeal. DSHE Holdings versus Abood. 2022 NS-BUP-CA 165. The Court of Appeal reverses Justice Ball on the dividend question. The court finds that both Abood and Potts breached Section 180 of the Corporations Act over the $11.826 million final dividend paid in August 2015, while the company was already insolvent under McGrath-Nichols' later determination. Judgment is entered against both for that sum. Potts's bid to halve his NAB liability is dismissed. The shareholder class actions settle separately. 3 class actions, funded by ICP and Van In, run by Johnson Winter Slattery, Cause Chambers Westgarth and Bannister Law, settle for $25 million. Approved by Justice James Stevenson on March 17, 2021. The distribution is the punchline. $19,590,125, approximately 78%, goes to legal costs. $282,000 to administration. $40,000 in reimbursements. Only $5,087,875, approximately 20%, goes to the 2,700 class members. Per shareholder, the average recovery is approximately $1,800. Justice Stevenson, verbatim, "A disappointing result, the best that could reasonably be expected. Given Dick Smith Holdings was in liquidation throughout the proceedings, and the directors' and officers' insurance policy was substantially eroded. The Australian Securities and Investments Commission investigated. Public examinations of Phil Cave, Bill Wavish, and Nick Aboud commenced on September 5, 2016. No banning order against Phil Cave, no banning order against Bill Wavish, no banning order against Nick Aboud, no financial penalty against any of the three. The regulator that watched the heist happen and did nothing. If you watched our Toowoomba Foundry video, you'll remember how Adsteam's 1991 collapse left CMI Industrial holding the debt that closed the Ruthven Street factory in 2012. ASIC named no one. ASIC sanctioned no one. Now read what ASIC did with Cave, Wavish and Aboud. The pattern repeats. The named villain escapes. Chapter 11. What remains? Stand on the Pacific Highway at Gore Hill in 2026. The strip where Dick Smith's breakthrough store anchored Sydney's North Shore electronics shopping from the early 1970s. The Gore Hill store closed on the 17th of July, 2011. A Jaycar electronics store now operates on the same Pacific Highway block at number 188. The competitor founded by Dick Smith's own ex-employee outlived the parent brand by a decade. Gary Johnston himself died on the 10th of March, 2021. His company is still trading. Dick's is not. Walk 900 metres west to Pyrmont. The Powerhouse Museum holds the Dick Smith System 80 personal computer, made 1980. Donated to the Powerhouse in 2012 by curator Damien MacDonald. Beige plastic case. The Fun Way into Electronics. Volume 1, orange, blue, black tricolour cover, written by Dick himself, sits beside it. An anonymous System 80 owner in the Classic Computers archive, in his own words. I purchased my first System 80 for $999 back. Some time ago now, from Dick Smith's, just so I could learn something about these things called computers. Somehow I knew that they would be important in the future, and so they were. In fact, they have provided me with an excellent career. He kept two System 80s working. He hand-soldered a disk controller after his associate diploma in electrical engineering. One $999 machine turned its owner into a career engineer. The Australian Computer Museum Society preserves the Super 80. Lesson 1. Private equity strips. Working capital. Working capital pays for itself. Anchorage arrived in November 2012 with $10 million. It bought a $115 million business using the business's own cash flow. It wrote down $121 million of assets. It sold the marked down stock at full retail margins without restocking. It generated approximately $500 million on exit by September 2014. The legal playbook that destroyed 3,300 jobs. Lesson 2. The hubris builds a perfume boutique while the foundation strips itself. Nick Aboud built a Fashtronics boutique at Bondi Junction in October 2013, while the warehouses filled with rebate-driven inventory. He took home a $2.6 million package and a $6 million IPO listing payment. The share price collapsed 84%. He resigned in January 2016. He moved to cheap as chips, owned by Alcyon Private Equity. Cheap as chips collapsed in 2025, the structural twin of Michael May at Iveco. Different sector, same outcome. Lesson 3. The charity pays for the greed. Epilepsy. Action paid $200,000 for Dick Smith gift cards. The cards were worthless on the 5th of January 2016. Anchorage walked away with approximately $500 million. ASIC banned no one. The Court of Appeal pinned the 11.8. $26 million dividend on Abood and Potts. The $25 million class action returned 20% to shareholders after legal fees $878. Every Australian brand sold to private equity in 2026 should know the Dick Smith story. The 5th of January 2016. George Street, Sydney. The Dick Smith gift cards stopped working. The epilepsy action raffle prizes were worthless. The Bondi Junction Move store was still polished and perfume-scented. The Powerhouse System 80 still sits in the Sydney Museum. The Funway orange-blue-black cover sits beside it. Kogan website still narrates the $610 founding myth as if the company is alive. Phil Cave bought David Jones in 2022. Bill Wabish ran a proxy war for Endeavour in 2023. Nick Abood collapsed cheap as chips in 2025. Anchorage is still operating, still buying Australian brands. The greatest private equity heist of all time. The brand on a Kogan website that still says it was founded with $610.